Hi, hello. My name is Mackenzie, also known as Emtothethird on Instagram, Ravelry, and here on YouTube. I own a naturally dyed yarn company called Emtothethird Yarn Co., as well as make knitting content here on YouTube. I've had this idea for a video series for a while, and my idea was really to record the entire process of me knitting, kind of familiar knitted objects like a hat and a pair of socks and a sweater, and to record how long it takes me to do it or, time the recording. And the reason I wanted to do this was because I, as a knitter, and I'm sure you, if you are a knitter, am asked very frequently, oh my God, how long did that take you to make? When I'm wearing a sweater or I'm wearing, a shawl. And it's hard to explain, I think, to a non knitter why that's a hard question to answer. um, I don't sit down and put a timer on when I start knitting, and I don't think any of us who knit for pleasure and not for, you know, knitting garments to sell, um, you know, sort of measure how long it takes. So I thought it would be cool to do this with sort of like, I mean, and this is where it gets complicated, right? Like, I knit socks on a US 1 needle with fingering weight yarn, but I also know that you can knit socks with thicker yarn, um, with bigger needles, with smaller needles. So this is just like the way that I usually knit my socks. And I recorded knitting one sock and timing it. Also being aware that like I'm a fairly fast knitter. I knit by picking, meaning that I hold my yarn in my left hand, although I do trade off between picking and throwing, which is holding the yarn in my right hand. And like, other people have less efficient and more efficient ways of knitting and might go faster than me. There's so many factors that determine it, on top of the fact that many of us just don't pay attention because we do it for leisure. And just like, it's not something we're timing our progress on. So my goal is to answer that question in a very general sense. Just to give people an idea of how long something like this, something that I'm knitting, takes. So I decided to start with the sock. I had this yarn that I was pretty excited about. It is from Republic of Wool, who is based out of Portland, Oregon, and the colorway is called Back to the Future, which is pretty rad. It has all the colors I'm like super into right now, which is kind of like teal and orange and like flashes of hot pink and like very bright purple. The skein just, it called to me. And so I had a lot of fun doing this sock because I wasn't sure what the yarn would look like knit up. And it really ends up being kind of like micro stripes. Every row is essentially a different stripe of color. And I think they'll go really well with my wardrobe and the colors that I usually wear. So yeah, I enjoyed knitting the sock and the yarn a lot. I do use a contrast color for the heel and toe, which I will talk about later. I would be remiss if I didn't include some painstaking footage of me knitting in real time, which, after watching at like 2000% speed, it's a lot to watch. Just like how slow it feels to be knitting. Um, when I have a project like this, which sometimes happens as an owner of a small business, when I need to make a sample or when I'm doing a video for YouTube, I like to put on a very engaging TV show to hold my attention so that I'm not focused on, just the project that I have to be working on. And the third season of a show that I really like came out, so that's what I watched for most of this. I was watching this show called The Sinner, so a crime drama that really I did not know where it was going, so I was like, what the hell is going on? I deleted all the audio from this because it doesn't sound great when it's sped up, and I was planning on doing this voiceover, but like all of the audio just has me going like, what the in the background. So yeah, it was a good show. Highly recommend, especially if you're into crime dramas. But the 2x2 ribbing took me quite a long time to do. I think longer than I expected it to. I think at the end of day one, I had knit for, over an hour, and I was not 3 inches into the ribbing, which is what I like to do for my socks. That's actually fairly new for me. It's something that I just realized that I like the look of and I like the feel of. And I usually knit top-down socks. I've done toe up a few times, like when I have a specific amount of yarn that I'm trying to use, but most of my socks are knit using the magic loop method, which is what I'm doing with that long needle that you'll see sticking out, as well as from the top down to the toe. So I do 3 inches of 2x2 rib, and then I just knit in stockinette for quite a while. I don't know how many inches I do it for, but I do it for longer than the 3 inches for sure. Then I will do an enforced heel flap, meaning that I will do like a knit one, slip one across, and then when I come back the other way, I will purl. I'll do the heel turn, and then do the gusset decreases, knit the length of the foot, and then decrease at the toe. And Kitchener it all together at the end, and that's how I've been knitting socks for basically my entire knitting life. I've tried other ways, but this is just my tried and true method, and I really like the way that they fit. So, and I cast on 64 stitches. Sometimes if I'm trying to make the fabric really dense, which tends to hurt my hands, but also makes like a really lit sock, I will do 72 and just like knit it very tight. But like I said, it's tough on my hands, so I try not to do that. So we're beginning day 2 in Boston with a storm. It was very pretty, but also very cold. So yeah, this is sped up quite a bit because I knew that you didn't want to sit with me through the entirety of this sock feeling like you're just watching the same thing over and over. But I do finish the cuff, the 3 inches of the 2x2 rib, and it took me about an hour and a half, which I always felt like it took a long time, but that was confirmation that it does take longer than I expect it to. So I just get comfy cozy in my office. I have my little space heater on, and I just knit on this sock while watching The Sinner. I have a wrist ruler, like a bracelet, and that's what I was measuring the cuff against. So I either do that or I keep one of the socks that I've knit before around, and I will like compare it and hold it up against this sock that I'm knitting. Yeah. So right here, I am once again making you sit through my painstakingly slow real-time knitting. You know, usually when I do purling, I don't pull my finger down that far, but on these tiny needles, I find it kind of difficult not to do that. But when I'm on bigger needles, I do what's called the Norwegian purl, which is a much smoother way when you hold your yarn in your left hand to do the purl stitch. And so there I am, indeed, at 3 inches. So now I can just start knitting forever. You know, it really is worth it for hand knit socks, though. If you have been too intimidated to try, or maybe you're already a convert, oh, I love them so much. And, you know, the colors and all that. I think this angle, like I was trying out a bunch of different angles, but I think this one really shows the sock growing. Just going around, going around. I've basically decided that it's impossible to teach a cat that they're in the way. Moose likes to lay on my chest even when I am sitting vertically, which is like the funniest thing. I'm like, there's no ledge for you to stand on. So I did get quite a bit done on day 2, but I have a lot to go before I can do the heel. So that's what I focus on now. Just going until I get to that heel. And I did decide to, I think I mentioned this, to do a contrast heel and toe, which I found in my stash. Oh, and like I said, also, see how I'm comparing it to this other sock that I knit. I can see that I still have a bit of space before starting the heel flap. So I basically just decided to do another 20-minute, like my, oh, and I have provisions. I made cute cookies for Valentine's Day. What was I saying? Oh yeah, my camera sort of records in these 20-minute increments, so I decided to just knit straight in stockinette for another 20 minutes, and I felt like that would be enough to get me to where I could start my heel. And I was pretty right on about that. So at this point, I'm still watching The Sinner. It was so good. Have you watched it? You should go put it on your watch list right now. It's on Netflix. I'll wait. Yeah, so I just knit for another chunk and before I start the heel flap. I also decided in this heel flap that the contrasting yarn is a yarn from my stash that I have used in another sock. There's some gray in the skein, the variegated skein that I'm working with. So I pulled out this gray skein of sock yarn that I've had and used, like I said, to do for the heel. I've also been noticing lately that my heel flaps have been a little too shorter than I would like. And sometimes I confuse myself because I knit with the socks. It's like a 64 stitch sock. That means that there's 32 stitches on each needle because I'm doing magic loop. And when I do the heel flap, what I really should be doing is 36 rows. Sometimes I even go up to 40 rows. But I think because of the 32 numbers, I think I've accidentally done 32 stitches for the heel flap, and it's not enough. I don't know if any of you can relate to my weird number fixation, but right now I'm adding the heel flap and then turning the heel, and then I pick up all of the gusset stitches before I put my knitting down for the night. So yeah, a lot of progress has been made in 3 days. Oh, that little fire by my hip is my space heater. It looks like a little fire, pretty cute. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure I picked up all the stitches and got the heel turned. I always feel like once I have the heel turned, I'm mostly done with the sock, which isn't really true. It's the halfway point. But yeah, that felt like a good stopping point. I do finish the sock on day 4, if you can believe it. I mean, I busted this thing out, you know? So day 4 consisted of finishing off the gusset decreases, finishing the foot of the sock, and then knitting the toe. At this point, I did finish The Sinner, which ended very well. It was so good. I couldn't stop watching. I ended up watching the last, I think, episode and a half in bed. But I decided to turn on another very captivating show or movie. I watched the Edward Snowden biopic that starred what's his name? Gordon-Levitt, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And it was really good. I would recommend it if you sort of don't know the whole story of Edward Snowden. I would also like to read his autobiography at some point. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that kept me motivated. And so I am finally to the toe. And you can see we just hit the 6-hour point. So the toe doesn't take me as long, which is good because, it's sort of satisfying to start decreasing and then to get to those last 20 stitches so I can Kitchener it together. And then once it's all Kitchenered and looking nice and neat, I'll flip it inside out, weave in all of my ends, and we're done. If you can believe it. And then, yeah, I mean, I kind of can't, but so the final amount of time that it took me to knit these socks and weave in the ends and trim the ends is 6 hours, 32 minutes, 27 seconds, and 52 milliseconds. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. Like I really love the yarn. Republic of Wool is great. Definitely check her store out. So one sock took 6 hours and 32 minutes. That means 2 socks, a pair, would take 13 hours and 4 minutes. So next time someone asks you to knit them a pair of socks, you can give them a better idea of what they're looking at. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Bye.